Well, hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us for this week's panel conversation. I'm really excited that you're going to be able to join us today to hear from leaders in law enforcement about how community perspectives impact the way that police services are delivered in their communities. My name is Matt Fulton. I'm the Vice President for National Engagement for an engagement company called Polco. We work with communities and police departments around the whole topic of engagement and in helping to track performance and just kind of measuring overall engagement in the community. But we put on these panels really to just get the perspectives of leaders in law enforcement about how they're handling resident engagement, how those expectations are managed, and how they're kind of tracking how they're doing. It's such a weird time that we're all living through right now, especially in the law enforcement world, that it makes sense to have these kind of conversations. And the whole purpose for the conversations is to gather ideas from law enforcement leaders and then share those approaches and those creative solutions with others who might have interest in those particular topics. The program actually goes pretty straightforward. It'll be about an hour long. I'll introduce the panelists and then we'll get into the actual question process. We have 3 questions that we're going to be asking each of the panelists. We'll provide some opportunity for just sharing comments and additional input from the panelists when we get through the questions, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. But it's a time where we really are interested in just learning what is working in various communities and helping you to maybe get a new idea on how to approach the whole topic of resident engagement. So let me get into the introductions. Our first panelist is Angela Greene, who has served as the Chief of Police in Lexington, Virginia since the middle of 2020. She's got nearly 2 decades of serving communities in Virginia, starting in Richmond, where she rose to the level of captain, and then in Portsmouth, where she served as the Chief of Police. Chief Greene places a priority on establishing and maintaining collaborative partnerships between public safety and the community she serves, so it's going to be really valuable to hear her perspectives in today's panel conversation. Chief Greene, I would love it if you would add a little bit more to your background, and I really appreciate you being here.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Fulton, for this opportunity to talk to you and other law enforcement executives, citizens, and residents. So in Virginia, started my policing days in city of Richmond, Virginia, capital of Virginia, majority minority community of over 200,000 residents. Left the city of Richmond in 2016, obtaining the rank of captain, and went to the city of Portsmouth, Virginia in 2016 as the assistant chief of police, again, a majority minority community, as well as about serving 100,000 residents in the city of Portsmouth. In 2019, I became the chief of police in the city of Portsmouth, and now I'm here in the city of Lexington as their chief of police as of May of 2020. Smaller department, smaller agency, about 7,000 residents, and minority is a minority population that we have in the city of Lexington. So I've had the opportunity, the pleasure of serving in urban populations and now a rural population, but it all plays the same in what our residents want. They want to feel safe in their homes. They want an improved quality of life, and they want to believe that their police officers that are serving them have the same vision and ideals of public safety that our residents want.
That's great, Chief. Thanks for giving that backdrop. To all of our panelists, and given your background, one of the things that I would ask you to kind of think about is how do you get to those hard to reach populations, and any suggested ideas? And it sounds like your experience will serve that aspect of that question really well. So thanks, Angela, for being here. Really appreciate it. I'm happy to introduce Chief Jim Williams, who became the Chief of Police in Staunton, Virginia in 2003, although he's been with the police department since 1984. So he's had a long career in the department. He's been recognized for his service multiple times, including receiving the Award for Valor from the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police and Law Enforcement Officer of the Year by the Staunton Moose Lodge. He's the past president of the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police and currently serves as the vice chair of the State Associations of Chiefs Division for the International Association of Chiefs of Police. In addition, he is appointed by Governor Northam in 2019 and currently serves as the chair of the Criminal Justice Service Board for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So Jim, thank you for being here. That's a great career and wonderful recognitions. I would love it if you would add a little bit more to your background.
Yeah, so thanks for that. I've just been doing this a long time. I remember I remember being a young patrol officer, young supervisor, thinking, gosh, when are these guys going to retire, man? They must be 50 years old. And so now they're saying that about me. But it's been a great career all here in Staunton, which I was not really familiar with. Staunton is right at the intersections of 81 and 64, or exactly 100 miles west of Richmond, which is the capital. 25,000 population, Woodrow Wilson's birthplace. Kind of harping on the tourism thing now. Statler Brothers, hometown here. We used to, on July 4th for years, we had a celebration where about 100,000 people showed up, and we had to manage that large scale event. But just been totally blessed here. You know, all the stuff I've been able to do, but more happy than not about my family. I got 33-year-old, 28-year-old sons. My 28-year-old and his wife are getting ready to make me a granddad inside of 2 weeks now. First grandkid, excited about that. And my late wife of 30 years, who passed away with cancer in 2016, led me into a career, well, a quasi career of running outside. And so in October, I'm scheduled to run the Boston Marathon for the 10th time. So spent a lot of time there and trying to keep our officers motivated in the community, and you know, officer safety and wellness is a huge piece. And then what we're all dealing with now, which is trying to recruit and retain people in this climate here, along with all the expectations, managing the citizen expectations. So it's a real balancing act right now, and you know, coming out of a pandemic. And of course, you see the numbers. Police chiefs are retiring and quitting like never before. So interesting time in our country. So, but thanks for having me, and interested to see what my cohorts have to say.
That's great. Well, congratulations on your long career and your work-life balance. Best of luck in the Boston Marathon. That's quite an achievement. I've done a few marathons in my days, old days. But I know what it takes to make it to that race. So congratulations on that. And I used to work with a police chief who his running actually motivated, I think he had up to about 10 officers that they collectively ran a marathon. It was really a pretty inspirational thing, not only for the department, but for the community, because the cops would run around in all the neighborhoods, and essentially they were on patrol on foot. It was a pretty cool deal. But thanks, Jim. I appreciate you being here a lot. Finally, I'm happy to introduce Commander Roderick Robinson, who's been a member of the Chicago Police Department for 29 years. He's risen through the ranks of the department, serving in a variety of really challenging leadership roles. And he's presently the commander of the Community Safety Team, which is a 700-member citywide unit deployed to the most violent areas of Chicago to help re-engage the community and suppress violence. I think just given that that responsibility that you have, Commander Robinson, really makes me excited to listen to your perspectives today. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, I actually just got into these upper ranks about 5 years ago. So that's when I made lieutenant, and I kind of been on a little fast track since then. But that was when the community relations part really took hold, when I was a lieutenant. At that point, I really got to know the citizens and wanted to get to know their problems and how we could do it. I was placed in an area that probably had the most open air drug markets of anywhere in the nation. So we addressed that, and we addressed that wholeheartedly by just going face to face with the residents. And once I made captain of the Inglewood district, and then a year later commander, that's when I really had a stronghold, and I can do community engagement the way I wanted to do it. And I was getting in front of things and pretty much talking to every demographic that I can talk to within my area of responsibility. So with that being said, my area was majority Black, but we had a Hispanic population that's steadily moving in, and pretty much it's going to be in the next few years half and half. So I had to pretty much adjust my focus of my community policing office to say, hey, we got to change with the demographics, and that's something I really took hold of. We had a lot of young people. So every person in my community policing office was one that reflected what we were doing right there in my district of responsibility. Meaning I changed and made sure I had a Hispanic officer in there. I had a lesbian officer to address the LGBTQ community. And also, obviously the Black officers, but also had younger officers. One officer had just come on a job with just a couple years, all the way up to an officer who had 20 plus years. So that's where I believe I made my mark as far as that, and where it placed me where I am now, because I had the first part of my career being enforcement wise and being in the high crime areas, and then the latter part, these latter years, being in community engagement and attacking that also.
I think just given that varied background, Rod, and the variety of talent that you have with you is going to really help your perspectives in this conversation. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Well, let me kind of kick off the topic. The topic we're exploring today is putting police needs and expectations into a community context. Public safety is such an important responsibility, and it impacts every aspect of community life. As a former city manager of many, many years, I just have great admiration and respect for the work that you do in leading departments, and just the challenges that are confronting law enforcement agencies, particularly now, where there's so much input and impact from community voices that's having direct impacts on police departments. The expectations on law enforcement in the community are so high, and it's easy for the public to take for granted all of the responsibilities that the department provides and has in helping with maintaining a high quality of life in the community. And the really unique aspect is that if there's a mistake made, it literally has generational impacts. And so the work that you do in guiding your departments and in leading the officers that serve your departments becomes such an important element, and how you embrace community input and incorporate that input into the decisions that you're making and the way that you're delivering law enforcement services in a way that is going to be expected by the community becomes so just vitally important. We do we at POCO, we actually have a survey that's called the National Police Services Survey. It's actually designed to help communities get an overall understanding of where community perspectives are on policing. And it was originally set up in 2016. We did a national administration of the survey back in 2018, but then given all of the things that have happened over the last couple of years, we did it again in 2020, just to kind of measure the change in sentiment on community perspectives around policing. And the chart that you see in front of you talks about the shift in resident priorities. And when you look at trust and all of those things that are really important for you as leaders in law enforcement, that overall number has shifted downward, but the overall priorities have stayed relatively the same. School safety and security being the highest ranked priority that residents have. What's really interesting about this graph is that the areas that have actually increased in priority relate to increasing connections with the community and increasing resident accessibility to police. So in other words, it seems to me that residents are more interested in building better partnerships, greater connections with the police department, so that their input is being heard and incorporated into the delivery of law enforcement services. It's been a really interesting period of time that we have all lived in through COVID. And I think that our research has shown that trust in local government has increased overall. And I think that makes sense because leaders at the local level have stepped up and help residents to survive in all aspects of life over the course of the last year plus. And it's really important to be able to just understand and try to capture what's worked and what hasn't worked, especially for those harder to reach populations, so that the investments that people are making in their communities, whether it's financial or otherwise, they really feel as though their investment's being a sound investment, and that their return on their overall investment is increasing. And law enforcement and the way that the police services are delivered are such an important part of that overall equation. So today's conversation is really designed to get input on three different questions. What role should the community play in guiding or influencing the delivery of local police services? What strategies do you use for managing those expectations? And then finally, what tools and methods are you using just to understand the resident perspectives and expectations, priorities, and helping to assess kind of your overall performance as a department? And so to kick it off, what I'd love to do is to start with you, Chief Greene. Could you talk a little bit about the role that the community should play in guiding or influencing the delivery of services in Lexington?
Absolutely. So the community should always play an active and engaged role in the police services that they want from their police department, the vision that they want of their police department. Urban vision may be different in policing aspect when we look at a rural community. But as I stated before, they all want the same. And as your survey suggested, they all want an increased engagement and commitment and accessibility to their police officers. So by doing that, we have to make ourselves more available to the community. And as you talked about in some of the underserved communities, we have to go into those neighborhoods and we have to make ourselves available in a less threatening manner, in a non-law enforcement manner, but to listen to our community members and our residents to know what they are looking for from their police department. But part of being actively engaged and an active participant with your police department as a community member is to also have an open mind and be willing to learn and educate yourself on police and policies, roles and responsibilities, and also remembering that officers are human beings, that we do make mistakes. And we are normally under high stress situations. And we have to make split second decisions that can be life altering decisions for either the officers or the community members. So where we need the citizens to work with us is to not only be open-minded, but educate themselves, attend citizen academies to learn about why the police do what they do, to learn about our policies and our procedures, and to know the difference of when they see something in the media, that 10-second clip that they see, that there's things that happen before and after that interaction, and to be able to put all those pieces together and try to put themselves in the officer's shoes and why they made the decision that they made, but also to build that trust with their police department that if a mistake was made by an officer, and again, we are human beings, that the proper procedures and discipline measures will be taken to correct that behavior and to make sure that it doesn't continue in the future. So it has to be both parts of the law enforcement agency and the community members willing to work together to learn each other's roles and responsibilities and have that open-mindedness, willingness, and education. And on the officer side as well, for the officers to actively listen to their community members and to be able to give a little in order to make them feel more comfortable and trusting of us.
That's great. Do you have I'd love to hear about your Citizens Academy, but I'm kind of curious, is the public, do you do a strategic planning process, and does the public get engaged in kind of that decision-making process?
So in my prior role as chief of police in Portsmouth, I'm still new here to Lexington. We do have a strategic plan, and we did have a chief's advisory board that we met with every month to go over policies and procedures. Here in Lexington, I do plan on implementing a chief's advisory board to review our policies and procedures, but also give the citizens an opportunity to help us install new policies, such as a body-worn camera policy, to listen to their thoughts and their vision and work with them to make sure that any new policies we have going forward reflect their vision, and to also bring the community members in as part of our training. They are role players with our crisis intervention training, mental health training, our use of force training with our non-lethal and lethal simulations. So the citizens can see firsthand how an officer reacts to a citizen either escalating or de-escalating a situation, and again, gives them a firsthand perspective on the training that we do, but they can also give us feedback on how they think we can better enhance our training capabilities so we're better prepared when we deal with these real life situations.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your prior experience is definitely going to help out with all the things that you've got planned, working with others in Lexington. So congratulations on what you've done to date, and best of luck with everything else that you're going to be doing. Chief Williams, can you talk about the role that the community plays in guiding the delivery of police services in Staunton?
Yeah, sure. So, Sir Robert Peel, back when he started the principles of Metropolitan Police, said the public are the police and the police are the public. And we adopted a community policing philosophy years and years ago, and it's kind of the cornerstone of everything that we do. I can't tell you how many things that we do that we think about the public. And I tell people all the time when I meet with the public groups, there's only 53 officers that we have in Staunton to police 25,000 people. And that's when we're full. And I will tell you, we haven't been full but 6 weeks in the 37 years I've been here. So we're always short. People are always hurt. You're always hiring. And so it's less than that, and it's because most of the time the community is doing what they need to be doing. And so, we're coming in those emergencies or whatever else, and it only happens. So my, the city manager, which is 3 city managers ago now, Bob Stripling, when he hired me to be police chief in 2003, said, Jim, I'm gonna give you some important advice. He said, most people make decisions based on relationships, and they don't make it on numbers or data. They make it on relationships. If they trust me, then they trust me. Doesn't matter what. And I found that to be so true. And any relationship that you have, if there's no trust factor there, whether it's with your children or your spouse or your significant other, it just doesn't. And it's the same thing. So we try and foster positive relationships with our community day in and day out. So when the bad stuff happens, I get a phone call, what happened? They look like this really bad arrest. What was the deal? They kind of give us a little bit of a leeway to find out, what happened, or let me look into it, because Chief Greene is absolutely right. The reason I can tell you that that we don't always get it right is because we're staffed with human beings, and human beings make mistakes, and it starts with us. I've made mistakes in my career, and our officers certainly make mistakes, and they don't make a lot of mistakes, and they do a pretty good job. And what I found out since we went to our body worn camera program, I guess we're in 6-7 years in now, is that they do way better than I really thought they would, quite honestly, in dealing with situations that are just really tough. So, but yeah, you got to start that, early on with your community, reaching out, the faith-based community. For us, it's just a number of things. So, but you got to do that. You got to have that relationship, and you got to foster it, and they have to understand what we're doing. And then we have to understand what they want, and their priorities change. We survey our citizens, and things that were a priority a few years ago aren't as much now. But it's also interesting, like in the national landscape, with all the negative policing, and a lot of people read about it, what most people say is, well, my department's really good, but I don't know what the hell's going on in, fill in the blank. Right. I see this stuff on TV, and I mean, those cops are out of control everywhere else. But, here in Staunton, they're pretty darn good. Here in Chicago, they're pretty darn good. Here in Lexington, they're pretty darn good, So we're in this kind of weird thing, where they want everybody else kind of to be changed, and the stuff they see, but they've got a lot of faith typically in their own law enforcement agency, which is interesting.
I love you bringing up the whole trust factor throughout all these panels over the course of the life of these panel conversations. The issue of building up that community trust, and it's through those kind of personal contexts and the way that you're engaging in the community becomes such a relevant part, because you can't really do a whole lot if you don't have trust, right? And so the work that you're doing in Staunton around those those direct connections and the relationship building probably paying off really, really well. Does the community have a formal, any kind of formal structure for incorporating resident input in like strategic thinking and overall policy decisions?
Well, like I said, we do surveys, and then in my department, when I became chief, I actually elevated. We've got only 2 divisions. I have a captain, which is a direct report for me. One captain is law enforcement services, and they do patrol investigations, all the things you think about. The other one is a community involvement support operations, and so that's there. I have a captain level who is focusing on what's going on in the community, what are we doing, and then the support operations, all the stuff, vehicle maintenance and all the stuff that you don't think about. But yeah, so and our surveys that we do we're nationally accredited through CALEA, and there, other than mandatory standards that you'll survey your folks every 3 years, we actually survey them every year. We also do checks we're the PSAP, the Public Safety Answering Points. We also run the E911 Center for the city. And so we're constantly sending out surveys of, how long did it take us to get there? Are you happy with what the officers did and that kind of stuff? And then we get follow-up back as well. But, the citizens have found a way, via social media and other things to let us know, what we need to be doing and what we don't need to be doing. And, it's not unusual now on a Saturday night, which boggles my mind, but for the official Staunton Police Department Facebook page to be getting the message, there's fireworks going off in my neighborhood, and me or one of my staff is responding to the public, and wouldn't you just call the number, or whatever? but it's a different world, it's a different world. And if you're 20 something or under, the way that you expect police services, or maybe, through Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or something, and we're still trying to navigate, all that. But again, it's a win-win. I mean, it can be painful, but the traditional media, gives us what they give us, but we've got an audience now, and we can tell our whole story right there. And that's been really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. You'll probably add a little bit more flavor to that in one of the following questions, I would suspect.
Sure. Yeah, try not to ramble too much, as I am wont to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. Commander Robinson, can you talk about the role that the community plays in guiding or influencing the delivery of police services in Chicago?
Yeah, obviously the big city, we have we have 22 different districts. So, the demographics across those 22 districts are different, are very different to every one of them. So we do have a community engagement office from headquarters, but we also have one within our district. So what I did in the district is that I had my community conversations, and we did those quarterly. During those community conversations, we asked them their problems. We engaged the citizens that came on what they had them prioritize their problems and what they believe needed to be policed up front. So we did that, and then we came together with them, and that way that it comes straight from them. They're guiding what we address first and foremost, which number one is usually public safety, and then right after that is quality of life issues. And it was surprising of which quality of life issues that really bothered the citizens, and sometimes they only talked about the public safety part for all of 5 minutes, but I guess that's because it's all in the media and social media and things of that nature. But they really bogged down to the prostitution and stuff like that, and just that ended up being sometimes number 2 on the list, or obviously the narcotics and stuff. So but we let them guide it in that respect, to be just like Chief Greene stated. Be engaged in the process, be active in the process, and that way, they feel like they're accomplishing something when we do have success in addressing that problem, and that goes from the start to finish. If they feel like they're a part of the solution, it's a great effect on the satisfaction of the community.
Yeah, that I'm writing that down because I don't want to forget that idea. Because if you feel like you're part of the solution, you feel good about your community. I mean, I'm kind of curious on your quarterly district level engagement meetings. How many people generally would show up? And is there a large dispersion between or differential on age groups or demographics that attend?
Yeah, I had close to, I would say around 80 to 90,000 people in my district, so my meetings, I actually had groups of different variety, different demographics. I have a obviously faith-based committee. I have a senior citizen committee, youth committee. I kind of address everything in that respect, but of course the older citizens they come to the meetings a whole lot more than the younger ones. So I would get probably 40 to 50 constituents that will come to those meetings. The younger it goes, maybe the least amount is somewhere around 12 to 15, but definitely in that range. But I mean, the senior citizens or the faith-based, they're definitely the talkers and the ones that will really give you the problems that's going on in your area, and those are the ones that, even though the younger people do have a big voice, those senior citizens, when they come in force and come in numbers like they do, it kind of, you have to satisfy that, so.
Yeah. Well, what a great way though to connect at the neighborhood level, even though the neighborhood is relatively large. Making those opportunities available are just a wonderful way to engage the community. So congratulations on doing that. That's great.
One thing I want to bring up, I'm sorry, what we started just a year ago was called a district coordination officer. And these officers we actually have a team now, other than just the CAPS team. These officers have a cell phone, department phone, and they're accessible to the public 24/7 now, and the public can express their displeasure with things or problems that's just happening outside of their house, and those officers are now responsible for engaging and taking care of those problems firsthand, and those DCOs, as we call them, they have accomplished a lot in that respect. And that's one way. I know it's going ahead of the game, but those are the officers that we have in the district that will gauge the success or, the lack of success, in addressing these problems now. And that way it's not just going all the way up to the top. And obviously in an organization as big as Chicago, we don't want to get it lost in the channels. So we keep it district wise, and then also now beat wise, because those district coordination officers are assigned to a beat, or a section. They might have 3 beats in that section.
Yeah, got it. Well, I'm going to be interested in your response to the next question, which is going to be around managing. But let me switch over to Chief Williams. Can you talk about the strategies that you're using in Staunton for actually managing community expectations?
Yeah. So again, like I said, I've got a captain who's in charge of that, and then a sergeant underneath. And so we just try and listen to the community, and we've got different ways that we go about that, as well as a survey, the community meetings that we attend. Some of it goes through, city council. We try hard not to make it just be the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You don't want the 1 or 2 people that always have an opinion to kind of drive what you're doing. And even when you have a meeting, you have to be careful that you don't let, because you'll have 15 or 20 people sitting there that are quiet and 1 or 2 people. So got to kind of pull it out and find out really, where we're going there, and then go from that. But yeah, it can be tough, and especially tough in the pandemic. But again, we're even exploring more ways. We're looking at getting our own YouTube channel, again, just to get our story out there and have other ways to engage with the public. The younger folks have figured out if your luggage is missing from Delta Airlines, you don't go on the 800 number and wait 6 hours. You do a quick video and put it on Twitter, and then pretty soon somebody's going to find your luggage, And so we're dealing with that same thing now, trying to manage kind of, with different ways. Because if you're my parents live in town and they're 79 and 81 and they're not on Twitter, will they show up for a meeting? Yeah, maybe. And so you've got to reach these multi-generations with, you know, what their expectations are and meet them where they're gonna be. And so it's challenging, but that's, you know, that's our job.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool though that you're considering kind of the creative ways of responding or being able to manage those types of things. If you were going to be talking to another police chief about the most effective thing that you've done for managing community expectations, what would that be? Do you have anything that you in mind that might be most helpful to somebody?
Well, I think the survey has helped a great deal because we get that out to a lot of households, and we're not just sending them to people. We're sending people that actually got police services, and so then we're able to use that as a tool to our officers to say, hey, listen, you know, this is what's really important to them, you know, because they don't always get it, you know. And an example that comes up all the time is just follow up. Like if they call the police department, they want to know what the heck happened, right? And so our officers are kind of trained historically to like, well, move on to the next call. Fireworks, yeah, didn't locate anything, whatever else. And so to the person who made the phone call, like they want to know. And it's okay if you weren't able to locate them, or it's okay if they called about, you know, whatever it is, but they just want to know. They want to like, and so we're constantly telling our officers, like, close that loop. You know, our dispatchers, close that loop. Call Mrs. Smith back and say, thanks for calling about that reckless driver. And good news is Officer Smith located him on Greenville Avenue and issued him a citation, and they were a suspended driver. They are elated. And it's even okay when you call Mrs. Smith, when you call them back and say, you know, we weren't able to locate, but please, you know, we want the neighborhood to be safe. So let us know if he comes back or if you see it again. And they just don't want to be citizens, and you can't blame them. And that's what I tell our officers. I'm like, you know, if you call somebody with a concern and have no idea whether or not they did anything with that information, like it would tick you off, right? And so trying to be empathetic and put our officers in the shoes of the citizens, and then they tend to get it. They tend to get it. But you know, we've done other stuff. I think one of the issues with policing today is getting that sense of community. And there's too many communities where they come in from the outside, they police, and then they leave. And so we've tried to get as many of our officers. So our take home vehicle program is only for people that live in the city of Staunton. And that's because I want as many police officers as I can living here. I don't want them living 45 miles away and driving in and leaving. You know, they got to have some skin in the game. And so our foundation, which we started a few years ago, was looking at doing what Charlottesville does, which is offer grant programs, because it's a little more expensive in the city than it is in the county. And so offer them grant programs for down payments to buy a house in the city, you know, because that's what you want. You want them sending their kids to the public schools. You want them. I've lived in the city the whole time I've been here, and so people know me, and so, you know, I was a youth baseball coach when my kids were coming up, and so you develop all those relationships that you just don't do when you're living an hour out, driving in, putting your uniform on, and driving back.
Yeah. That's great. I love that concept because I think you're right on, and I'm really glad you brought up the close of the loop issue, because I totally agree with you that a lot of times people be very satisfied just if they know the answer. So congratulations on that. That's a great thing you're doing, and it builds on what you talked about earlier on just building that trust and building that engagement. So yeah, great stuff. Commander Robinson, can you talk about the strategies that you're using for managing those community expectations that are coming up in the district meetings in Chicago?
Yeah, you know what? We try surveys and things of that nature, but we just felt like because of the number of people here, you know, in the district and things of that nature, that we wasn't getting to enough. So we do we try to meet them where they are. So we'll have different events on different beats. You know, and I went to things such as we've had, you know, obviously jobs on the block type of things, and just gauging, because a lot of times people will say, can we get the services? We need these type of services and that, things of that nature. So what we'll do is on our jobs on the block program, we bring it to the block. We bring it to that beat, and we'll put that out there, and we'll engage them in that way and try to manage what they believe, what they've said they want, and we'll get them as much as we can. We get as many services to them as we can in that respect, outside of just the regular policing, and then when we get the regular policing aspect, we gauge that at those meetings that I'm talking about, the beat meetings or the senior citizen committee meetings. I had public safety task force. It was almost like I would make a new group every month, and just so I can engage more people and get them, if they felt like, that was something that clicked with them. When you say public safety task force and people, they want to be a part of something policing like that, it brought a different amount of people, or different people from the regular meetings out to say, yeah, I'm a part of that task force, So in that respect, we got them in. Once we get them in, and then, like I said earlier, you get them active in the in addressing the problem and the solution. That's where we gauge it, and in the end, it's the satisfaction of the citizens, and we can see it in the way that, obviously we all went through these protests and riots and things of that nature in the past year and a half. And I would gladly and I'll brag about the fact that in the Inglewood community, we didn't have as many as other places in the city, and I think it was because of those relationships and how we managed those community engagement strategies and things of that nature, that we kept that stuff down, and people actually, we had some groups come into Inglewood who were outside of Inglewood and wanted to protest and things of that nature. The residents actually told them, no, don't come there, and they got there, and the residents kind of I'll express it in a certain way, pushed them out, pushed them away from that community, and they never came back, So I think that was a basis that it was the foundation that we set way back that said, hey, we're working together on this, and we will address our problems there, and it's just just the managing part is just addressing their concerns up front, and those are things that foundation of friendship and collaboration, it goes a long way, and in the end, that's how we kind of manage success, and see how far we've gone.
That is great that you've got the level of engagement that the residents have that kind of influence to not allow those outside voices to come in. That's a job well done, I think.
Yeah. Thank you.
Chief Greene, can you talk about the strategies that you've been using for managing community expectations in Lexington?
Absolutely. So as Chief Williams and both Commander Robinson stated, relationships are important. And part of being a community is the various individuals that we deal with, and people identify themselves with being a part of, say, the senior citizen community, where we have our triad group, or my college community. I have 2 universities here as well, and our younger community from elementary school all the way through high school. They all have different expectations of their police departments. So we have to meet with them on their own level. The business owners, I meet monthly with the business owners to see what their expectations are of the police department and how we can better serve them, as well as the senior citizens and our youth through hopefully our police athletic league program to foster that positive relationship, starting from elementary school with tutoring and sports to our police explorers program, all the way through our college students who are more worried about social justice and police reform and things of that nature. So we also have to look at each individual group and relationships, but also on a whole, the entire public. I have town hall meetings in Portsmouth. I had a monthly Chiefs Forum. Now here in Lexington, I just had a town hall meeting. And because it's a smaller community, I will do that quarterly. And as Chief Williams said, update them regularly. Any issues, questions, or concerns, I will follow up with them immediately after, and also talk about it openly at the next quarterly town hall meeting to discuss what those issues were. Also, making sure we combat that perception versus reality. As Commander Robinson said, that sometimes the perception of, say, quality of life or prostitution is different in one community group compared to another. And as Chief Williams even pointed out, that data and analytics can show that maybe the perception of a community member's expectations or what's really happening in a community is not factual. And they may have been misguided by maybe their own perception or maybe something they've seen on social media. So it's important for us to get the facts out with data and analytics, our side of the story, but also get our facts out on social media and other media platforms, because we have what we call those keyboard warriors, people who don't really want to engage with the police or really want to hear our side, but want to play on the negative aspects and put things out there on social media. So we have to be just as proactive to make sure we counteract some of those negative biases that come into our realm and make sure we put out the facts on those situations and to show that we're meeting our community expectations as best as possible.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the whole notion of engagement in your community, I love the term keyboard warriors. I've never heard that before. That's a great term for folks that I think we all appreciate who they are. And that engagement mechanism that you're using in your town hall meetings just are ways to kind of counteract that. I mean, all of you are talking about the engagement aspect as just a critical way for building trust. And I think you're right on that. Those kinds of things are just key for helping people build that trust. And then they understand that there's a management aspect to the whole delivery of police services. So yeah, thanks very much. That's awesome stuff. Let's switch on to the third question. And Commander Robinson, I'd like to start with you. Can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using to understand resident expectations and priorities and help you get a sense for how well of a job or how good of a job you're doing?
Yeah, some of the tools and methods I've kind of brought up, but as far as, the community conversations, those things have worked very well. The district coordination officers, those things have worked well for me also, but one thing I always tell my officers is that, even though we have the district coordination officers and also the CAPS officers, community policing office, everyone's a community police officer every day. So that's where we're going to go the furthest. If that regular TAC officer or beat officer engages in some kind of community relation, that's where we're going to win. We can't wait for the events of what my community policing officer puts together. We have to do this every day, and if that engagement happens every day, then that's where we win, and that foot patrol, that's one of my key things, getting out of that car at least once or twice a day, and not just for jobs, but just to walk the block and say hi. We started putting into effect a couple years ago, actually getting the data of community engagements. So the officers go down on the air, on the radio, and state when they're engaging in the community and doing some type of talking and walking and talking with the community. So in that respect, we go to ComStat and our boss is there. I'm not a chief, but the chiefs look at that. They look at that engagement, in the certain districts. And, you have some districts that's just more than others. And the commanders take pride in that, and I know I took pride in it. That was one of my things. My things were getting out of that car and that community engagement along with traffic stops. We know that here in Chicago, unfortunately, the violence is very high, but it was a lot of drive-by shootings. So my two things of tools that effectiveness was traffic stops and also community engagement, but it's a matter of getting out of that car, not just rolling down the street, and I had 360 officers in my district. So per watch, we're looking at 100 or more per watch, more related on third watch was the one I really was worried about. And that's in the evenings because more people are coming home from work And that's where I wanted more officers out of that car engaging, and that was my focus. That's when I worked a lot of times too. And I would get those officers out of the car by engaging myself. On regular days, I would drive the district, and when I see that beat car, they're not on a job, they're walking with me, and it didn't have to be an event. So those are just the small things I think that go a long way. Just getting out of that car, community engagement, that walk and talk every day.
Do you, I think you said there are 22 districts in the city?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you do any benchmarking of data between districts in terms of, I'm sure you do for incidents and the types of incidents, but in terms of just the levels of engagement or anything like that?
Yeah, that comes out in CompStat here. So, and each district, it comes up, it's no regular schedule or anything, but it's all a matter of our chief of operations. When he brings that certain district up, but he'll definitely compare you to other districts in the city and where you rank. So that's where it all comes together, and that's where we can pinpoint where we need to really bog down and know where that engagement starts and where it can continue and improve.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chief Greene, can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using to understand resident expectations and priorities in Lexington?
Absolutely. So since I came here in Lexington in May, just to plug you, used your poll call service to do a community survey that we pushed out to all of the residents. And that was just a few weeks ago in the beginning of June. And we're going to close that in the end of July. So we did an initial meeting at my town hall meeting last week just to talk about the initial community survey results. But I also did an internal survey results of the officers, because I want to make sure at the end of the day that my police officers' idea of community engagement is closely similar to what my community and residents believe it should be. And if not, that's where that managing piece comes in, that somehow I need to fix it and tweak things along the way to make sure that the police are delivering the vision that the community wants from us. So the community survey is one tool, and it is done, we know, electronically, but I know my underserved community as well as my mature community might not have internet access. So we're also doing community walks. Every month we're picking a neighborhood and we're knocking door to door to talk to residents, to say, what do you want to see from your police department? Do you have any questions or concerns? And here's a hard copy of our community survey. If you did not have a chance to take it online, you can submit it to us in writing. And then at the end, we're hoping in September, we'll come back, we'll compile all those results with the officers and the residents. And at the next town hall meeting, we'll discuss those community survey results. And then we'll do it again at the end of the year and talk about what we've implemented, what we've learned from those community results, and what we've done differently. And if we've seen a positive result, and what we need to tweak along the way. But as we've been talking about from the beginning, it's just constant engagement with our community members and having that open communication and transparency. That's both ways to make sure we're all in this together and part of the solution.
That's great. You know, thanks for plugging POCO. I didn't realize that you were using our tool. That's great. I appreciate that. And I'll be excited to see your results. So
absolutely, I'll share
that way by engaging and then sharing and being transparent on the results. And so, congratulations on that. Yeah,
Thank you for your service.
Chief Williams, can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using for helping to understand resident expectations and priorities?
Yeah, so we know that Chief Greene made the cut with the POCO reference. The rest of us may, be on the cutting room floor, but
right.
Good. It's shameless, but that's awesome. Like Commander Robinson said, it really is that individual officer and that philosophy that you're doing it. Probably 10, 12 years ago, I stole this idea from another agency, which in college we call plagiarism. Now we call networking. But I wrote into our policy that each individual officer at least once a year will do some kind of a community policing project. And so they've got to make at least one effort doing something. And some of these they've been like unbelievably complex. Some of them not as much, but there's this conscious effort of 53 more, police citizen engagements, and some of them turned into some really good stuff. And Chief Greene also talked about, you got different populations. Mary Baldwin University is here, and so the way we meet with them through their security and their engagement folks, and try and figure out what these students that are only here for a short period of time, the way they view the world and what they want from the police department is different. Our school resource officers in our middle and high school that are serving those populations and protecting those teachers and things like that, versus again the mature folks. I'm just getting that information out. So obviously we're using Citizen Police Academy. We publicize Coffee with a Cop at the library, and that brings a certain people out. In the summer we've got an ice cream store, and we do Cone with a Cop, and we get a lot of the little kids coming out. So you just got to keep trying to put yourself out there and get as much information as you can from your citizens so that the police stuff, we all do that, and most of us do it pretty well. But then what are the nuances in Staunton? What do our public want from us, that they may not care about as much in Lexington? Sometimes it's quality of life stuff. Abandoned vehicles comes up quite a bit, and actually, quite frankly, traffic comes up a good deal. But we try to be smart and intentional about working traffic where it needs to be worked, and not just going out somewhere where it's an easy place to write 50 tickets. But yeah, so we try just an absolute, the scattershot approach. And again, I've talked about the survey before, and engaging our folks and engaging our community, and what do you need? What do you want? And then try to measure that and our successes, and try and follow up. And when we're wrong, we say we're wrong, and we try and get it right. But it's been a tough time for law enforcement. I don't need to tell you that, and trying to keep the morale up in your officers when the national narrative is the way it is. And it's tough. And I hear locally, one of our biggest issues is the mental health crisis. And Virginia's got some terrible, or some big problems, and our officers will deal with it, and that, and the folks will self-medicate, sometimes with methamphetamine and other things. And I'll have an entire shift sometimes just doing mental health transports, and there's not even time to deal with the community, because my entire shift is set up driving all around the Commonwealth trying to take folks who are in mental health crisis. It's tough. It's tough. And again, trying to keep them, your internal, trying to keep them safe and motivated and everything. It's been a real challenge.
What I hear though, Chief, is, it strikes me that you're building a culture of community policing. The idea of having your officers do a community policing project is just a wonderful way to just kind of remind them about the importance of being connected. And this gets back to the point I brought up earlier, and I love your perspective on this, is that a lot of times residents don't appreciate that a whole shift will be taken up by mental health officer or mental health calls, when all they're interested is the traffic stuff going on in front of their house. And that balancing act between helping people to appreciate the multiple overlapping challenges that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis is just is a daunting responsibility. You have any thoughts or comments about that?
Yeah, I think I think the public just really doesn't know. And I think historically in law enforcement, we've done a crummy job of telling our story. And we try and tell our story better. I went in this impassioned plea with our city council when right on the heels of the George Floyd incident, and people were excited and just trying to tell them. And I told them, I told them the story, well, not story, but the incident we had locally where an individual came into town from another community about 80 miles from here with the intent of committing suicide. He had stolen a gun, he bought some rounds, and right before he pulled the trigger, he called 911, and he got one of my dispatchers who talked him through for about an hour and 45 minutes. Now, everything else stood still and stand because my officers, the entire shift, had to get up there and surround this individual. And he was like, if you send him in, I'm going to make him shoot me, or I'm going to shoot myself, or whatever else. And the dispatcher did a phenomenal job in the shift deploying those officers, those personnel. And he was at a place where he could see people coming from all around. And ultimately, after almost 2 hours, she convinced him, to her credit, to put the gun down and walk out to the police officers. And also to make sure there was no mistake, like leave the gun on the bridge behind when you walk out, don't let anything happen or whatever. And she saved that young man's life, and he's alive today. He got some help. But that story doesn't make the newspaper. The suicide by cop stuff does, all that kind of stuff. And even if I tell my local newspaper, they'll be like, oh yeah, okay. Big deal, right? And Jenna was actually just honored as the International CIT Dispatcher of the Year, and she's going to get an award in Arizona based on that. But the public needs to know that, and that's why, again, we're talking about a YouTube channel or whatever, so we can tell these stories about the phenomenal things that our men and women do. Last week, I had a guy in mental health crisis. He posted on Facebook that he was going to harm himself. Our officers went by, guy's in his late 20s, still living home with his mom and dad. And his mom, oh, he's fine. He's back in the bedroom, whatever. They walk back there. Hey, Johnny, we need to check on you, whatever. I'm not coming out. Door flings open, sprays 3 of my officers right in the face with bear spray. And one of them, trainee, direct hit right in the eyes. And 30 seconds after that, he runs out. He'd already cut himself. He runs out with a razor blade and a knife, and they're able to take him down with a taser. They don't kill him. They don't shoot him. They don't use deadly force. All fighting through bear spray, which I've had a lot of experiences in 37 years. And I worked the road for a long time. I've never been sprayed in the face with bear spray before. I mean, I can't even imagine it. I'm watching it, of course, now through the body-worn camera, we're able to see this, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, And I tell my council members, I tell my manager, I'm like, we are not paying our people enough money. There is not enough money. We're paying them. We're just now going up to $40,000 a year for starting salary. And this is the kind of stuff. And this is the kind of, and I see the work that the men and women do day in and day out. And I'm just proud to be their chief. And we don't hear it, and the public doesn't want to hear it. Or, I mean, the public does want to hear it. The media, they'll tell you what sells. And it's not the dispatcher that saves the guy from killing himself. It's the bad shoot. It's the 5 guys with billy clubs beating the crap out of somebody. That's what sells newspapers. But we're in this unique position in time where I don't have to worry about it. I can put my story out there, and I know the state police here in Virginia, they do a great job of getting their stuff out. They put something over the weekend where a trooper, they showed his dash cam where he walked out and picked up an American flag that had been discarded around the interstate. And they're constantly putting stuff out. I know it's a pandemic, but you really can't drive 120 miles an hour in a 55, that kind of stuff. But we have got to use these platforms, and we have got to get our story out there. And it's hard because we've all got full-time jobs. My community officers, and they're working hard, but we got to figure out how to keep using all these tools that are out there. And like I said, as the people we're policing getting younger and younger, that's what they expect.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing those stories. Those are awesome stories. I think it defines some of the challenges that are being confronted by law enforcement agencies everywhere, and that's all the reason why you've got to build these connections, and so residents do have a better appreciation and context for the complicated work that all of you are doing. And that was just outstanding. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. This has been a great panel. This has been just a wonderful conversation. I would love to just know if there's anything that any of you would like to add to the conversation. I know we're up against the hour, a little bit past, and so we'll wrap this up pretty quick. But if there's anything that anyone would like to share, now would be the best time, or questions of each other. Anything come to mind for anybody?
Not really.
Right.
I'd love to keep in touch, say it like that. Or if we do run across each other in the future, can you maybe, send out emails or for both the chiefs and,
Yes.
just
Yep.
so contact information, just in case I get a chief job somewhere in your area.
Absolutely.
I'd love to have you guys as mentors, say it like that.
Yeah.
Well, I know we can learn a lot from you, and we got to talk offline. I got to tell you my Chicago story when I was at IECP this last time. My experience with some of your warriors.
Okay.
I tell you what, let's kind of wrap this up. For sure, I'll be sharing with you all of that information, and so you'll be able to connect with each other very easily. This has been great. I love the way that you have all embraced the notion of engagement and this whole trust building factor, the ways that you're doing it through the district meetings or through the use of community partners, all of the town hall meetings. I mean, all of those things are just great ways for building engagement and that trust factor in the community. And I particularly loved that Chief Williams was bringing up the differences in the way people engage depending upon your age bracket, right? And the willingness and just the recognition that you've got to be able to adapt to that changing mentality and the changing approaches, and the notion of being creative through the use of technology and all of those kinds of things. So thanks for sharing all of that. It is all about building trust so that you can be looked at as delivering accountable police services, and that you have the respect and building that culture in the community. It is about building that sense of community, which is such an important element of being able to work through things like COVID and pandemics and civil unrest and all of those kinds of things. And I just am very impressed with all of the things that all of you have shared on the ways that you're dealing with it. Love the district approach that you're using, Commander Robinson, on your quarterly town hall meetings, and the whole notion of following up. All of the thoughts that you have shared are going to be really helpful for folks who have the opportunity to review these discussions. So thank you very much for sharing that. I'm going to wrap this up just simply by telling you I will follow up. I'll send an email out today or tomorrow with all of the connections for you to be able to get in touch with each other. I do these panels every week. I'd love if you have anybody that you think would help in this conversation and would be interested in participating, send them my way. I'd love to get them scheduled to participate in a panel. Within about a week, you'll start seeing these panel conversations on LinkedIn, and I'll work with you to make sure that you're getting those. Our hope is that you'll share them with your networks as well, so that people who trust and respect your opinions will benefit from your perspectives. And then I will certainly be connecting with you to just to get your feedback on the panels, make sure that it was a positive experience for all of you, and get any feedback on ways that I might be able to deliver this conversation in a more meaningful way. I get the benefit of every week meeting 3 great people in law enforcement, and I really value that. I'm going to be down at the FBI training conference starting tomorrow. I don't know if any of you are going to be there, but if you are, let me know. I'd love to meet you in person. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining, and really appreciate your input and comments. Chief Greene, good luck with your relatively new position.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Chief Williams, thank you for your years of contributions and commitment to the community. Commander Robinson, best of luck to you. You've got big responsibilities in that big city, so best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right.